from Google's standpoint, if I'm doing a search on mobile, there are things they're going to take into account when they show me the results that are going to be maybe a little different than if I was doing it on desktop. Welcome back to Local SEO Tactics, where we bring you tips and tricks to get found online. I'm your host, Jesse Dolan, here again with Sue Ginsberg. How's it going today, Sue?
Really good, thanks.
What do you got on tap for us here today? I know we're going to answer a question like we always do. I think you got a good one.
It's a great question that came in from our SEO audit. The question is, do different things impact SEO on desktop and on mobile? Are there different tools to use for SEO impact on each? Thank you to Becky, a listener and a listener who used our SEO audit tool. So thank you for that. And I am sure that this is a question that many more people than just Becky have had. So that's what we'll be talking about today.
Cool.
Quote of the day: work whatever tools you may have at your command, and better tools will be found as you go along. And that is a quote from Napoleon Hill. He is most known as the best-selling author of Think and Grow Rich, which, by the way, is among the 10 best-selling self-help books of all times.
Right on. As it should be.
Yeah, that's right. If you haven't already read that, give a little plug for Napoleon Hill's book. Okay. Today, I'm going to share a self-deprecating story to set this up before Jesse answers the question here.
Should be good. Everybody get on the edge of your seat here. Let's hear this.
Right. That's right. Okay, so a few years ago, I learned to ride a moped, not a motorcycle, 250, 500 cc's, a 50 cc moped, like the kind that I always think of the witch in the Wizard of Oz riding. No, that was a bicycle. Okay, strike that. Anyway, it's a 50 cc scooter. Really fun, great thing to do. And I was going on an adventure with a friend who has been riding scooters and motorcycles for many, many years, and he was leading. I was new to scootering, if that's the verb, and much more comfortable letting him lead the way so I could focus on what to do to keep my scooter running without crashing into anything or anyone. Fair enough, right? I was concentrating hard. When we got where we were going, probably Dairy Queen, one of my favorite summer destinations, I very excitedly told him I couldn't believe how smoothly my scooter rode, even at 50 miles per hour. And he looked at me like I was crazy, and he laughed and he said, "Your odometer is kilometers, not miles." I was like, oh God. So then I do the math in my head. 50 km are 30 miles an hour, not 50, which that's a big difference, right?
Sure, it felt like 50, but yeah.
Oh my God. Yes, it did. Yes, it did. I share this story to make the point that if you're using the wrong tool to measure something, your interpretation of your metrics may very well not be what you think.
Right on.
And I have another self-deprecating story along this lines. I'd love for some of our listeners to tell me that I'm not the only one who gets kilometers and mph, miles per hour, mixed up, because I confess that this was not my first time. A few years ago, when my daughter studied abroad in South Africa, I was lucky enough to go visit her in Cape Town, where I rented a car. And yes, for the weeks before, I was practicing how to do a stick shift with my right hand so that when I got there, driving on the left side of the road, doing a stick shift with my right hand wasn't all new at once. So, as if that wasn't challenging enough, the signs obviously used metrics, not miles. With my baseline being, I knew a 10K is 6 miles, I spent my visit doing math in my head every time I needed to figure out, how far ahead is that exit? Oh, how many kilometers is that? How many miles is that? I was so mentally exhausted every time I drove the car that trip. it was very humbling. So for all of you business owners who drive on the left side, use a stick shift with your right hand and know the metric system, you have my respect.
That makes me think too right away, like, so I only have mastered barely the English language, right? I don't know a second language. I know a few curse words in various languages, right? But that's about it. But I'm always amazed at people that know two languages. In this case, like how you're deciphering that in your head. I'm always like, how could I possibly try to communicate, let's say in Spanish, while trying to translate in my head? And it's like, no, once you know it, you kind of become ingrained with it. You don't kind of translate that, right? If you're actually fluent, you just speak it. And right. So I'm getting the same vibes from you there. Like I can just imagine driving around doing that same computations, like your brain just hurting after a couple of days of driving around. So that's pretty good.
Great words there. Yes, my brain was hurting. So with that as a little background, tell us, Jesse, does having your mobile site and your desktop tested on for SEO impact, do different things impact them?
Yeah, I think it is a good question, and not so much like framing it up. Like, is there certain tools, right, for testing SEO on mobile, testing SEO on desktop? But really the question being, do different things impact the SEO right. for mobile versus desktop? I think that's, kind of the core of it. And the answer is yes, there are some variations on whether you call it the SEO, like the practice of SEO and the things we do as SEOs and marketers to rank our websites differently in mobile versus on desktop. So there's a little bit of it that, yes, some things you should do to be aware of. But then kind of the other part here I want to talk about is also how Google will show different things based on if you're doing a search on mobile versus right. desktop. And in some cases, that doesn't mean you can necessarily do anything different. It's just Google showing different things for different reasons here. So let's go through it though. So first things first is yes. It's not a guarantee. It doesn't always happen, but yes, there is a chance that your content may rank differently on mobile and on desktop. We're not talking drastic rankings like you're first on mobile and completely disappeared on desktop. I mean, I would expect it to be within a spot or two or three, jostling around a little bit, whether you're talking in the naturals or in the map pack. That might be a little bit different. In the natural for your web rankings on the SERP, search engine results page, that I would feel should be a little bit more, a little less fluctuation on desktop versus mobile search. But you start talking about the map pack. Obviously, there's a whole lot of proximity type stuff that we're going to talk about in a minute. That can impact that. So that may be more volatile on desktop versus mobile search. You might have different views on that. So yes, your content can rank. Your rankings can be different on mobile versus desktop. First things first. One of the biggest factors for this is really the personalization of search results. And then when you add on a lot of factors with mobile, usually for desktop search, like for myself as an example, my desktop is here, my laptop is here at my desk in my office at home. And any searches I do from there, like 99% of the time, that's where it's at. Like this IP address, this location. And so it's fairly stable in that regard as far as, Google has hundreds of things that it uses to personalize your search, your history, your location, preferences, etc. But the geographic location of my desktop search is pretty static, right? Mobile, that thing's in my pocket, right? Whether I'm going into town, whether I'm traveling somewhere, like whatever. If I'm doing searches from mobile, my proximity to these places completely changes. And that's going to be one of the biggest factors in the personalization and the change on what's ranking for mobile. We use a tool. We've talked about it before. And we're going to plug it here in this episode, Bright Local, for their GeoGrid reporting for GMB ranking, right? As an example here, what that's going to show you, let's just say if you take like a 9x9 grid of a metro area, it's going to show you if you're standing in that spot, how does your GMB, or your GBP, I should say now, how does your GBP rank for a search term if you're standing in that location? If you're on the northeast corner of town versus the southwest corner of town, you may be ranking completely different, right? And that really underscores and shows how much the proximity or the geolocation matters on mobile search. So with this, that's going to be one of the biggest things that makes a difference on how you're ranking on mobile versus desktop is mobile. You're on a mobile device, on a smartphone, if you will. You literally are mobile. You're moving. Your proximity changes given the location of you as the searcher versus the thing you're trying to find. So you're always going to have that be a big factor. If you as a person are doing the exact same search on those two different devices, you're going to see a big change because of that. Now, I'm not going to dive into really any other like personalization type deals, but again, you can imagine there's certain preferences, search history on your phone you might be doing versus what was on your desktop. All these things play into, exaggerating, right? Any differences or are factors in those differences. So overall personalization and your geolocation can make a big difference on what's going to rank mobile versus not. That does underscore the importance of using a tool like BrightLocal in their geo search grid, not just a regular keyword tracker for rank checking, like, hey, red balloons, Minneapolis, what's my ranking? Broadly for Minneapolis versus those pinpoint spots, over a 5 or 10 mile, radius. Because that is one of the biggest factors that can make a difference. Now, in addition to that, turning towards more, what does Google give more influence on for mobile versus desktop from a user standpoint, right? So that first part was more of like me as the person behind the keyboard. What am I doing and how am I impacting what I see in search based off me doing the search? Now, from Google's standpoint, if I'm doing a search on mobile, there are things they're going to take into account when they show me the results that are going to be maybe a little different than if I was doing it on desktop, right? Page speed of a website. Google came out, a while ago talking about how important page speed is for ranking as a factor, and that on mobile, it's even more important. Now, if you're in, a major city and maybe you got 5G or as broadband gets faster with cell service, speed isn't as big of a factor, but speaking globally for sure, there's still a lot of areas that have, 3G type speed. So mobile page loading, the speed that your pages load on your mobile phone is a big thing. And you need a fast loading website. If you're selling a product or a service that you're pretty sure most people are checking out on mobile devices, which is probably almost anything out there, page speed is definitely a big thing that you need to be aware of to make sure you're ranking in mobile. And like we've always talked on multiple episodes too, people should definitely, in addition to using maybe like a BrightLocal or other type of trackers, do searches yourself on desktop and mobile to kind of see the difference in these things, particularly, shut off your Wi-Fi on your phone and just go off your cell service and just see how that thing loads, compared, even if you're not going to use some testing tools for page speed and things like that. And you will see how the experience can change off a slower broadband connection versus a high speed, Wi-Fi connection that you might be tied into at your office or at your home. Hey everyone, just wanted a quick interrupt on the show here to talk about BrightLocal. If you haven't checked it out yet, go on out to localseotactics.com/BrightLocal, or you can go to our resources page, scroll through that, which has a bunch of different resources that we recommend and use ourselves, and look for the mentions about BrightLocal. There's a lot of things BrightLocal does. We use it in-house. It's one of our favorite tools. We mainly use it for the rank tracking for your website. You can kind of monitor your keyword progress, tracking the ranks, fluctuations, things like that over time for specific keywords that you enter in. We also love their local search grid tool for your Google My Business or Google Business Profile listing. And what that's going to do is show you over your metro area, whatever you select for the size of the grid, right? With 7x7 points, 9x9. Basically, you define a certain area and it's going to tell you if you were standing on those spots. How does your GMB rank for the specified keywords? So that's great as well. We also use it for citation building, citation management for all your properties and mentions out there, whether it be Yelp, Facebook, local city pages, BBB, things like that. It's a great tool to help build and manage your citations to make sure your name, address, phone number is consistent and all those other things to really get your digital footprint identified by Google. They also have reputation management where you can aggregate all the reviews that you're getting across all these different portals, see how many reviews you're getting, what your score is, things like that, and a host of other tools. check it out. They've got a free 14-day trial. If you go through localseotactics.com/brightlocal, or again, go to the link off of our resources page, you're going to be able to take advantage of that 14-day trial. It is an affiliate link. We'll get a few bucks if you do that. Doesn't increase the price for you at all. Just kind of makes the tide rise for everybody. So if you're interested in any of those applications, like I said, they've got a whole suite of tools that's going to help you out, whether you're an agency or if you're doing SEO for yourself. I should mention, if you are an agency or trying to start an agency, they also have some great white label options, so you can leverage their tools and their products for your clients to showcase the analytics, the data, and give a real professional spin on your reporting, which is something we use as well. So check it out, localseotactics.com/brightlocal, and take advantage of their 14-day trial. So page speed is definitely a big factor for ranking, and even bigger when it's on a mobile-based search. User experience is also another one that really can impact mobile. Things like that, what do we mean? Big buttons that you can click on, making sure people don't hit two things at once, right? With big fat sausage fingers, things like that. You got to make it friendly to use on mobile. And by that, I don't mean the responsive design, right? Where it fits the page. Mm-hmm. That should be pretty much like default now for most websites. They should be responsive and mobile friendly from a, fitting on the page standpoint. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about like the clickable elements, the buttons, the links, making sure that you can use your fingers to navigate that website instead of a mouse like on your desktop, right? Again, going back as developers, marketers, and SEOs, we want to be testing our sites on mobile. Usually we develop them on desktop, right? We're sitting there, we're working, we're at our machine, but you want to test it on mobile for these kinds of things so you can get first-hand experience on if it's friendly in that regard. Also, from the user experience standpoint, which can ultimately impact your rankings, are things like pop-ups, right? Like if your information is important at the top of your screen, on desktop, maybe you had a big pop-up like get 15% off your first order, and it looks good on desktop, right? And it's attractive and enticing. On mobile, maybe that takes up the whole screen and people can't even scroll anymore, and they're looking for this little bitty X to close the pop-up. They may just get frustrated and back out, right? And that's going to impact your bounce rate. That's going to impact the quality of your website. Then over time, if a lot of people are getting frustrated backing out, guess what? Google's going to demote your website because people aren't finding it as a good result. So indirect, but these kinds of things, these user experience things, definitely over the long run can impact the ranking of your website. And you're going to want to pay attention to those on mobile. On desktop, that really won't matter as much, right? If people are doing desktop searches, but if people are doing that same search on a mobile device, that's again where you're going to see maybe your website starting to rank lower because of that. If you're not up to speed in those areas, I'd say that's probably like some of the biggest things without getting too speculative and opinionated. Those are pretty, pretty well known, if you will, in the SEO industry. Reinforced by Google as real things. Not a lot of speculation here on those things that we described. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just focusing on mobile, to rank higher in mobile. What makes an impact there for your SEO? User experience, page speed, and then just being aware that your GBP may show up differently based on the proximity where people are, and that's a whole nother topic there on how to influence your proximity and, rank higher and get a bigger reach with your GBP, but definitely something to be aware of. On the mobile side, on the desktop side, there isn't really anything that you would do special to rank higher on a desktop search, right? The conversation is a little slanted towards how to get more optimization for mobile really there, and what impacts the mobile ranking more than the desktop. So hopefully that is a good enough answer. Sue, is that what you're looking for? Did we cover the bases there?
I think that sounds great. I have a question for you. You mentioned things like the size of the button and some other things that affect the user experience when you're on mobile, especially when you're designing a website in order to make it mobile responsive or responsive for all screens.
Yeah.
Do you need to design differently when you're thinking about that, or you do the same design and make sure that it shows up well on both?
It's a great question. I'd say as a default, have it in mind, keep reinforcing yourself that people are going to view this on mobile probably the majority of the time. And things like fancy animations or things that, like if you're on the desktop, like this is a really widescreen, big image, just keep reminding yourself, check that out on mobile too. Design it for mobile first, really is the best rule of thumb. Now, particularly if you're in the business to business space, I mean, you can still get a lot of traffic on desktop, right? People are at work and now they're looking for your product and your service at work on a desktop or on a laptop. So you may want to do some things that look better, right, on the bigger screens than on mobile. But most websites, especially if you're in WordPress, are going to be, automatically responsive. So to your point, like you don't have to design it to be responsive. These things should happen automatically. And I don't know that you need to take any special steps other than making sure you're checking it out on mobile to see how it looks, and then go back and change your design accordingly. It's a little bit of chicken and the egg, type deal. Like where do you start first, right? Do we start making it for mobile and then also look good on desktop? Or do we start creating it in desktop and then continually checking it in mobile to make sure that it's working good there and playing good there too? I think that's going to be preference of the designer. So
that's super. You bring up, I think, a super interesting point that most people we know do their searches on mobile, but most people, probably to the same, even higher than 90%, are designing websites on a desktop.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And that's something we talk about internally here at Intrix, right? For the designers, anybody messing with page content is we can't just look at it on a laptop and high five each other like, hey, that looks great. Okay, check it out on mobile. Is that going to be good on a mobile experience? And in we like to design to where it's the same thing shown both ways. It's just a responsive design. But there is another layer you can add there as a designer where you can show or hide things based on the screen size. So it's like, okay, maybe we have this nice hero image here on desktop, but if it's on mobile, it's going to be a different image that's shown. Personally, I like to shy away from that just because I like more simplicity and keeping it uniform. That way you never have to remember to update both things. But there's the ability to manipulate it there too, which adds a little more complication. So,
wow, that's wild.
Yeah, I think moral of the story there is definitely check it on both from a design standpoint. So and then again, when it's working good there, that's going to help your rankings on mobile. So really, really interesting. Really great question and really interesting insights that you shared. Wow. Yeah. It's kind of like you have to think of everything in order to get it to be good on both. It's not just whatever you're working on. I wonder if there is anybody, for whatever reason, who's ever designed a website on a mobile phone and why. Yeah, I'd like to talk to them. I'm sure it was an extremely painful, painful process. A lot of the tools, if you will, quote unquote, or the WordPress backend. I've personally done quick edits, like changing text and things, but to actually design a website on mobile that's got to be pretty clunky. So, yeah.
Okay, listeners, if you know anybody who's ever done that, please let us know, and then let us know why they were doing it on a phone, not on a desktop.
Yeah. So, if they had a choice, like maybe if you didn't have a choice, all right, kind of understand that story. But if you're choosing to do it on your iPhone, yeah, let's talk. Pick your brain.
Maybe Guinness World Book material.
I don't know. That's maybe a new category.
I don't know.
You should do it, Sue.
Okay. Thank you for those insights. And for our listeners, if you remember one thing and one thing only, remember this. Yes, different things impact SEO on mobile or desktop because your experience on mobile or desktop is different, right down to where you are. So even if you consider the near me feature, which you mentioned, Jesse, obviously on your desktop, that's going to be the same each and every time that you're doing a search, where on your phone, it's going to be all different places, which also means Google storing different history in your phone, which is going to impact what shows up, et cetera, et cetera. So user experience, page speed, and the whole impact of near me that Google runs are some of the things that you mentioned that impact that. But most importantly, yes, they are different. Whichever one you're designing on, test for both. probably testing more on mobile, and especially since most searches these days and getting even more are done on mobile. So
100%. Nope, you're right.
Before I get back to the quote of the day and how that applies to today's discussion, shout out to anybody who lives in Cape Town, because while I was there confusing my mind on metrics versus miles per hour and miles, Cape Town is the most beautiful city I have ever been in, with the oceans and the mountains, and really, really beautiful. So lucky you, whoever you are, if you get to live in Cape Town.
Nice.
Okay, quote of the day: whatever tools you may have at your command, and better tools will be found as you go along. Thank you, Napoleon Hill. Plug for his book, Think and Grow Rich, and plug on the SEO front to test your website on your desktop, on your iPad, on your mobile, and make sure that it works well on each of those before you launch.
Right on. Good stuff, Sue. If you guys are out there listening, you gals are out there listening too, if you like what we're talking about here, if this topic spurs any questions you have, right? If you're like, oh, if they would just answer this one part, go further on that, like whatever it is, or if you got something else out of left field, that's what we're here for. Go to localseotactics.com, scroll down to the bottom, click the button to submit a question. You can type it in and we'll talk about it on the show, or you can call the number that's listed there, leave a voicemail, and we'll play the audio on the show. If you do that, we're going to send you off a free Intrix t-shirt and, of course, let you get a shout out on the show and answer your questions. So, yeah, good stuff, Sue. Thanks for setting that one up and providing the insights, and hope that helps everybody listening out. And we'll talk to everybody on the next episode. Take care.